You're listening to another episode of Recon Live. I'm Bruce Quick alongside Jason Whitmire. And before we get started on today's episode, make sure you follow us on social media at Recon. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and then turn on those post notifications. And you can follow this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Make sure you catch up on all the past episodes as well. And then finally, most important, visit our website, rickrecon.com, for all the latest apparatus information. So today, an exciting guest, an exciting topic. Ricky, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I won't do you justice in introducing you, so I'll let you do that yourself. So go ahead, Ricky.
I did a podcast recently with my friend Chris McClune, and I said, just to dispose all that, it's just I'm Ricky Riley, and I like fire trucks. So
Perfect.
But I definitely got a pretty long career, as you can tell by my gray hair. But most of it revolves around apparatus. I mean, I've never worked a day in my life. I've been a career firefighter since I was 19 years old, and in different departments in Fairfax County, Virginia, Clearwater, Florida. Back in Maryland now. So it's been a very exciting, very fulfilling career. And now I'm really just into apparatus. I mean, I still do operational stuff with the department, but my main focus is the apparatus and taking care of the apparatus, the mechanics, and buying new apparatus and stuff like that. So I have a great time. It's never a chore for me. I just enjoy it a lot. So.
That's awesome. We're really happy to have you on today, Ricky. Our focus today on the podcast is going to be on apparatus and some of the maintenance. So as an industry, depending on exactly when this episode airs, you've heard of all the things going on with the industry, long lead times, increasing prices. We just had hearings last week on Capitol Hill about what's going on with fire apparatus and the industry as a whole. Today, we're going to focus more on the apparatus you already bought, the one you already spent the money on, how to invest in that apparatus, how to make that investment pay off for you and last longer. So we're going to get a controversial, maybe controversial. We'll see how Ricky responds to this. But several years ago, NFPA, back when it was NFPA 1901, they introduced Annex D, which Annex D, the purpose of Annex D was to kind of give some teeth to the fire departments to go out there and say, I've got this old fire truck. I need to replace it. And here's why. Here's why I should replace it. You know, the argument that was made for a while was you don't see people riding around in 15-year-old police cars. You don't see 15-year-old garbage trucks for the most part. Most of those are replaced sooner. Now in the new NFPA 1900, it's Annex F, but it still exists. And we wanted to get your opinion, Ricky, from the other side of the table. How does it affect you? Does it help? Does it hurt? What's your opinion on this annex?
It's funny. I had a conversation with Tom Shan last night about NFPA 1900, the old NFPA 1901. But as we talk about that Annex D, which is now Annex F, I don't feel like it has the teeth. I mean, at one point it was in the standard itself, and then they kept moving it to the annex and moving it to the annex. And, the very first line is the annex is not a part of the requirements of this NFPA document. So, I mean, it's more about information. And then now you have to sell that information. So I can go in front of a council or an executive board or, the command staff and go, hey, look, NFPA recommends that we do, we have to replace the apparatus from take it out of front line and put it to reserve. And then after that, at 25 years, it should be replaced. But, there's no teeth to it to say, yes, at 15 years, it should be, go back through an NFPA review of does it meet all the requirements in the current edition, an NFPA, whatever that edition is. And then, so it doesn't really, I don't think it really helps us. It gives us a little bit of framework to go with. But, now, you already referenced it, is that with what we've been experiencing the last, 4 years or 5 years, I mean, none of us can pay attention to this anymore. I mean, you have to hold on to your rigs as long as you possibly can, because you never know when you're going to get your next new rig. And I was listening to some In the Baltimore, Washington area, we have a group of, apparatus managers that, every couple months we get together and, via Zoom or Teams chat or whatever, and have this conversation. We kind of discuss all our problems, and all of us were in there discussing about how long we're going to start keeping apparatus and the protracted delivery times. And then all of a sudden it's at, yeah, they promised it to me this month, and now it's going to be another 4 to 5 months. So, something has to be running calls. Something has to be out there servicing the public. And now, our budgets are getting eaten up by repairing old fire apparatus. So, I'm sure you have some questions or some comments about that, but so I'll stop talking for a minute, because if I get on a soapbox, there'll be no knocking me off. So,
You're okay.
No, it's all good. And I think you started to bring up the next point there towards the end. As the apparatus gets older, I think there's a lot of things you have to consider in terms of evaluating stuff on a regular basis to make sure your apparatus is safe and in service. Can maybe you highlight some of those areas or talk about some areas that are often overlooked?
yeah, so even in our organization, right at COVID started, we had really started to get into look at our fleet and go, hey, look, there's some rigs in here that are way past, that they should be running up and down the streets. And, then we can go back, hey, let's reference Annex F or Annex D. And, and then what is the cost of that rig per year, depending on, whether it be an aerial, whether it be a squad, whether it be an engine. And then what can we do? And I think one of the things that really struck me is that, I would go, look at my spreadsheet or look at a piece of paper or look at some data, which, all of us should be collecting all the time, and go, yeah, this engine right here should go out of service. We shouldn't be maintaining it anymore. Whether it be, just because it's old or it's antiquated. It may have a good maintenance record, but, still keeping an operational component, for myself, affords me the opportunity to see the rig in the wild or out on the street. So, we had a perfectly good rig that we were looking at, getting rid of just due to some age, and the manufacturer was no longer in business. And, I run a call on what we call our Capital Beltway, for an accident with people trapped. And, I can barely see the fire truck, when we're pulling up. For my goodness sakes, the Road Ranger truck was more brighter than the fire truck. So now we're looking at what we're doing for our people, when we're operating in this atmosphere. And I will say, without any reservation, I'll take a house fire any day of the week as opposed to standing out on some high-speed roadway anymore. And I think our people, our firefighters, our paramedics, when you run those calls on those limited access highways or high-speed highways, you get acclimated to that environment. And I don't think they see how dangerous it really is. Now, for me, I don't have to run them every day. So for me, I'm hypersensitive to it. So, blocking apparatus, I don't, 2 to 3 blocking apparatus, how many lanes we're going to take. And then, then we started, I strayed off the topic, is getting focused on, updating that rig. The first thing was we have to update the emergency lighting. It's, old, bulbs and, Federal aerodynamic light bars that, only half the gears worked, and, the flashes didn't work. Say, what can we do to upgrade this to LED? How's it going to affect the system? And then we started worrying about scene lighting. I know we have a question about scene lighting later on, but, that was just the first step. And then, now we take the rig in and go, hey, let me get the rig in the shop and let's take a look at the engine. Is the engine still being manufactured? Where can we get parts for that engine? When we're looking at some of these Series 60s and motors from Detroit, and even the the D-Deck motors, now we're trying to find, we're really getting good at eBay, and we're getting good at a lot of these sites that sell the parts. Even the local vendor for those, like the Detroit Diesel or the Cummins, they had difficulty finding. We were getting parts from like Iowa and Indiana, to keep these rigs in service. So is keeping that engine feasible just because of parts? And then, then it goes down to the transmission and how well it rides. What does the suspension components look like? Obviously probably with something 15, 20 years old, it's all going to be all springs. And, that is definitely not a good ride anymore. I mean, obviously it used to be the norm. I mean, that's what all I drove and grew up in, but, with air ride suspensions and all these different, suspensions that we can put underneath the apparatus now, can that be retrofitted into the apparatus, or does it just need a whole new spring pack? So uh, other things that we're looking to upgrade is the air tanks and the airlines. I mean, as the fire truck gets older, the air tanks start to fail, the airlines start to fail, and then that always calls out of service items. And two big things that uh, on that particular apparatus, or one of, if it's not an engine, if it's a ladder truck, is paying attention to the main focus. So how good is the pump actually? We're a little failing a little bit on our pump testing. I would say there's a lot of departments that are absolutely on top of that on their game and can identify when that pump is, the impeller's starting to go bad, packing, anything that could be going wrong with the pump. And they're on top of it. And then obviously the aerial ladder if you're dealing with a ladder truck. Generators if we're dealing with old rescue trucks, that's their main power source, and then hydraulic lines, brake system, lighting, all the stuff we kind of talked about is stuff we're going to evaluate to try to keep that rig in service and keep it longer on the book so we can wait for that new apparatus if we've got funded that year, to buy new apparatus to keep it in the fleet. So we were actively looking at getting rid of rigs, and we got rid of some rigs that I regret getting rid of. And, that'll come back to that statement will come back to haunt me later on in life. But is because, we can't get new stuff. So we got to keep the old stuff, and we can't have firefighters riding around something that's unsafe. Now, obviously when we looked at some of our older rigs, when they still had lap belts, that fire truck was, that was an easy one to get rid of. Because
Right.
that's, we're not protecting our firefighters by having them ride around in lap belts. So
No more open cabs.
believe me, I wish I could still ride an open cab. So
Yeah. Something that I wanted to ask that you just touched on. So we keep hearing about these problems at times with OEMs with parts. And I think sometimes it's not the OEM. So a great example, you take your big OEMs out there, your Rosenbauers, your Rev Group, or your Pierce. If you have a body door go bad, you have a cab door go bad, they've got the prints on that. They've got the history. They might not have it sitting on a shelf, but it's bent metal. They can make it. What you touched on is the motor, the axles. Well, they don't make the motor, they don't make the axles. So is that where you're seeing some issues, is not so much what the OEM makes, but what that third party made that's starting to go away and you can't find parts? Would that be
nothing brings me more joy to when a firefighter, the 20-year version of myself, who knew everything there was about the fire service, would say, hey, one of my first pumpers was a Young, by Young Fire Apparatus, and something would be wrong with the pump. Oh, this Young pump. Yeah, like Young made fire pumps,
right?
Lack of education, lack of understanding. Nobody told me what it is. What the actual problem is that, we're looking at a lot of the parts and pieces that go on that apparatus, and we now we document those failures. So when we go to look at a new piece of apparatus, we'll go back and look at the same apparatus from maybe 3 to 4 years ago that we bought, go through the entire file and say, how many, we'll use an example like an air dryer. How many times did the air dryer go bad? Was there a problem with the air dryer? Do we need to change the manufacturer of that air dryer? Because once again, Pierce, Rev, Rosenbauer, they don't make air dryers. That's and we're not beating up on Davco or anything. It's just that, just the part that we picked. So, understanding that those parts need to be looked at and how easily can you get those parts? I mean, we did a lot of changes to our rigs to ensure that even the emergency lighting is something that now was not proprietary to the OEM. So, hey, we want a Wayland light, a Federal light, whatever kind of emergency light we want on that rig. Is it how easily can we get it? Do we have to go to the OEM, or can we just go to our local dealer? Or even better yet, can we go directly to the light manufacturer to buy the light instead of having to go through all this process? And I think enhancing when you go to these trade shows, of course, everybody wants to go to the big booths. Everybody wants to go to the big, see all the fire trucks in all its glory. I spent a lot of time at the littler booths, with the alternator manufacturers, the brake manufacturers, the light manufacturers, and trying to get a good rapport with them, because they're the one that's going to help me keep the fire truck in service more than the OEM, unless it's a technical issue, with wiring or amperage or stuff like that. And I'm probably going to need the OEM to interject. But hey, if it's a light issue, and the lights that we use, we have a great rapport with the people that we use them through. They have great warranty programs, something that we want to look at. How quickly can they turn, the product around, regardless if it's a light, if it's a transmission issue, air tanks, any kind of pump stuff, how quickly they can turn that around. And having those relationships with those manufacturers, just not your OEM, I think is critically important. Whether you got 1 or 2 fire trucks in your firehouse, or you've got 100, we got 680 some rigs that we're dealing with there, or and if you're New York or LA, just goodness gracious, they're the big dogs, so I'm sure they have all this figured out also.
I'm just curious, do you use a specific software for tracking some of the stuff, some of the maintenance things? I know we get the question from time to time from people about software for tracking maintenance. And I know there's a few things out there, but I was just curious if there's something you use specific that you're happy with.
No, I would say we're not happy with. We do a lot of still manual, a spreadsheet, a Excel spreadsheet. There's a file with every truck that has every ticket in there. So whether they do it at our shop, or it's done through a vendor, or done through the dealer, or done through the OEM, we generate a piece of paper for that. And, that sounds antiquated, but it really works for us. I mean, to be able to go look through a truck file and look at the dates, should we be able to, import that into a program and search for it? Absolutely, we should be able to do that. And even with some of the programs that we looked at, or, I've been on conference calls with, is that I just don't think they're there yet. And I would say that the way I track things, the way I look at things, even in the Baltimore, Washington area, is different than Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Washington, D.C., you guys had Eddie Rice on there, just a different thought processes and how they track all that stuff. And it's interesting to get on these conversations with them, or get on these conference calls with them, and see how differently we gain that information and how we use it out there. But I mean, for our people in the field, currently we're using the Check It program, for them to use that, to access that. And we still got some bugs we need to work out of it, but as with any software, and as we push it out to the field, it's always going to need a little tweaking. So it's not on them that we're having our little issues. So
I think the one thing we bring up for our audience quite often is we're in our own little world, and we're unique in the fire service, and we're unique, like you just said, from someone from Baltimore City to Baltimore County, who are surrounded by each other. They're still unique. And that's one of the problems. Is you get a software company that wants to make fleet software. They want to make it for someone that's going to buy thousands of copies across the US. And when I'm servicing an over-the-road truck, that's probably just fine. But when I'm servicing a fire truck, we're a small group when it comes down to it, when you compare us to an over-the-road fleet.
Yeah, and I don't know, like you just said, I mean, who's going to spend that money? The company,
right?
The software company, to go, yeah, we have all this stuff. Here's our base thing. You keep adding stuff on, and then once it's in, where's their growth? If you get that. So and we are unique. It's very interesting to be. I was at the IFC conference recently, and we were talking about Cummins Motors, and and listening to people talk in the classroom about, it's the fire service, and then you hear, hey, the motor manufacturer doesn't care about the fire service.
No.
They care about the trucking company. They care about, whatever, there's a couple big, huge names that are thrown out there. They're the people that drive the motors that we get to use in the fire service. So, we are a very small entity in this big world. I mean, even though we're on, having hearings at Congress, it's just, we are a very small world, and we're very unique. And it's not like, I can buy a fire truck in my organization and they take it to LA and LA go, that is the dumbest specification. That is the dumbest fire truck I've ever seen. And then, you bring an LA fire truck over here. I don't even know if we know how to turn it on. So it's a great, I love the fire service. I love who we are. I think that I in the last couple years, I have been vocal about, I think the OEMs were going to push us to a point where they were going to say, here are the options you can get on a fire truck, and that's it. And I don't want that. I don't.
No.
I mean, I thought they were going to do it, and so I mean, I push everybody that I consult with as an apparatus consultant or anything to go buy these standardized trucks, so it'd leave more custom slots open for me to buy my fire truck and have all my stuff on it the way I want it. So I'm sure LA, Milwaukee, Chicago, they're all probably the same way. So I don't think we're getting out of this anytime soon. So
the OEM would love to go back to the days of what was it? Mac was, you had option 1, 2, and 3, and that was about it. And this is what you get. And some history at LA at one time, probably early 70s, LA built their own fire truck once, which was kind of unique and interesting as well. So we talked about some of the maintenance things and some of the things to keep that rig in service. As a rig does get older and we get into that 15-year period where, yeah, the annex says you should be pushing it to reserve, but maybe in today's day of budget and lead time, you need to stretch that rig out for 4, 5, 6 more years. What are some of the things that you look at? And you touched on one or two already, but what are some of the things you look at upgrading? I mean, for example, we're going to put a new engine in this. Well, that's not that simple. That's very difficult, even because people don't realize you can't just buy a stock engine. It's specific to that OEM to fit into their cab. So what are some of the things that you would consider upgrading?
I mean, obviously the big one is looking at the braking system. And I don't mean like, hey, we're not going to switch a drum brake over to a disc brake. Is it, hey, how do we need to replace all the hoses on it? Do we need to replace all the lines on it? Then, we go back to the pump, the pump itself, all the little plastic lines for the gauges and when was the last time the pump was overhauled? When was the last time we took it out, looked at the impeller, or scoped it, either one of those things. And then, and then it's an electrical mess. I mean, if you had a fire truck for 15 to 20 years, we use that as an example. There is no telling how many people have been in that fire truck and messed with those wires, and all that color-coded wire and numbering have all gone out the window at that point. And now is it causing a problem on the fire truck itself? So do we need to go back and redo harnesses? Do we need to go back and look at the electrical system in itself? Is there a way to fit a bigger alternator on it? Is there a way to, put more batteries in it? Anything to help boost the electrical system, which is actually, the heart of the fire truck now. You all think it's the motor. But, without any 12-volt power, none of that stuff's going to work. We could certainly do without 12-volt power decades ago when we had a fire truck, but not today. I mean, we got to power the computer for the engine. We got to power the computer for the transmission. We got to power the computer for the pump or the aerial. So, we got to have a good 12-volt system. And then obviously upgrading the lighting. Once again, I can go back and listen to podcasts that I've done in the past. And when we talk about apparatuses, that you can't put enough lights on. Well, I am from Maryland, so there's no way that you can put enough lights on a fire truck. But as once again, getting out into the field and at night and during a rainstorm, hey man, these LED lights are the greatest thing in the world till it's nighttime and it's raining or it's snowing and we're blinding drivers and you can't even tell what's coming up ahead of you. I mean, we just had one of our lighting manufacturers come in and, we have all the lights on the back and had them slow them down, reduce the speed to try to, and I don't think we're ever going to be able to gain any information from that to use as data, because I don't think we as a fire service do a very good job of investigating fire department vehicle accidents. Right. Chris Daly, from Pennsylvania, an expert on the topic. I don't understand how any of his class isn't sold out by the hundreds at FDIC every year to try to figure out what we can do to help avoid some of the accidents that we're having. And I don't know if it's the internet that's making these more prevalent, but obviously, any of these websites, every day you can go on there and see a fire truck accident, but we don't never know what caused it. We can speculate, we can hear rumor and conjecture, but it's very rare we see a report that says, hey, let's say the driver of the vehicle that struck us, for lack of a better term, survived and told the truth. Was it, hey, I couldn't see because of the lights, I couldn't see because of that, or the truck was in, a quarter of the lane, not the whole lane, all this information that we need to get to make this stuff right. And I know I've gotten off a tangent about my accidents, but
No,
those
it's
things scare me, man. They really, it is scary, man. It's just in the last couple of days, for instance. I mean, the amount of deaths and injuries that have happened, and I just try to focus on what we can do as the fire apparatus shop, or what the OEMs can do, or what the lighting manufacturers can do, or what new systems out there that we can put on the apparatus to help our firefighters so they don't get struck. I mean, I saw Pierce had that radar thing at FDIC this year, where it's going to try to help us. I mean, I don't know how many years that's going to take to get to a point, and is it really going to work? And I don't mean that against Pierce trying to design, that's a different company, but there's a lot of whiz bang stuff out there that I'm not sure that works all the time. So it's all important stuff.
it's a really interesting point you bring up, because if there's a line of duty death of a firefighter, we investigate it very in depth. But if there's just an accident, I mean, I don't mean to downplay it, but if there's a death of the pedestrian or the person driving the vehicle, that doesn't get investigated the way a line of duty death would. And if there's no fatalities, then like you said, it gets investigated by a local insurance company, but it never goes into a national type of database where we look at it for apparatus to try and figure out the problem. I know
100% correct.
we've addressed some of it with NFPA, with the warning lights going into a night mode now where they can dim. We've got technology, and I know our competitors have technology now with their scene lights where you can dim them down some. And that kind of ties us right into one of the upgrades that we talk about all the time, or scene lighting. And you went into, I think you touched on something that's huge. You had these old trucks that had halogen lights that weren't working, that started to fail. The bulbs don't hold up anymore. They're not vibration resistant like they used to be years ago. So when you go down the road, that light, it vibrates, it goes out. Now you go to put LED on, and you put the brightest thing in the world that you can find. And it looks awesome in a parking lot at night, isolated. But no one's giving a lot of thought to what does it do on scene. So you touched on that. If you want to elaborate on that at all, or talk about any light you've done, how it affects wire sizes and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the LED fad is here, and it's not going anywhere. And it's not a fad. I mean, it is what it is. But I mean, you have an older fire truck, and you go look at some halogen light, or, some bulb light, even for it's running off a generator. It's just so terrible. And so you look so poor, for lack of a better term, is that, now let's go out and get the latest and greatest thing. And then we're going to buy all these lights, and then we're going to bolt them on our fire truck, and we're going to drill holes in it. We're going to run wires. And then did we even look at the amp report from the truck when it got delivered? I mean, is the alternator already maxed out? And then every time you stop the truck, do you have to put the high L on, which we know doesn't help the motor any, or the DEF system, or the canisters? And then, what's the load manager doing with all that? And then do you have to, I mean, we have apparatus at our place where it's a current rig. I mean, we bought it in 2022, but I mean, we put so many scene lights on it that, the cab and the tiller cab are 12 volt, and the ones on the body are run by the generator. So, once again, are we maxing out that generator? Are we draining the batteries? Are we overpowering the alternator so much that we're draining the batteries? We got to police ourselves to not go overboard. And then what might you have to give up to achieve this goal? I mean, what electrical shed might you have to do if you're all about this scene lighting? So, then we have to look at our emergency lighting too. Are we going to change the emergency lighting to help lower the amp draw, so we can get more scene lights, or is it, vice versa? So it's something you have to take a real good look at. And then, but I would say any truck 15, I know for a fact, any truck 15 years or older, 20 years, still has an amp draw report from, even that many years ago. And if we're maxing out that 250 or 300 amp alternator, then we really better take a look and get somebody that's really good at electrical, that not being me, to understand what if we're going to bolt this scene light on and it's got all this lumens and how much draw it's going to take, and what if they're all on at the same time and we're sitting on the scene. So all important considerations when we're upgrading that scene light.
So if anyone in our audience doesn't follow 100% what Ricky's saying here, because I know an apparatus guy would, but maybe someone who's just on a committee doesn't realize, NFPA requires an amp draw report by your OEM. You, as the guy that rides the fire truck, as the guy that pulls a hose off, you've probably never looked at it. You've probably never seen it. But for anything built in at least the last 15 to 20 years, there was a report done when that truck was built that showed what every component that was originally installed, what it would draw, and then what the total draw was against your alternator. That's available to you. Those records are maintained. So if you do a little searching, you can find that.
Yeah, I mean, I think OEMs are getting really much better about publishing that data on their websites or, their in-house programs, whatever OEM it is, that you can go back and research your fire truck from 10 to 15 years ago. They just putting that data on there, probably like the maintenance program should be. So yeah, so we're able to do that. So hey, I wanted to hit on one thing before we get. I don't mean to jump, because I was looking at my notes here, and we talked about upfitting and keeping our current apparatus in service longer. And I have a different kind of take on that, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
So I really, when we're talking about taking care of our current apparatus, I believe it starts with the day we give them that new fire truck. So from that day, the day we give you that new fire truck, for me, that is, or for anybody that does specifications and fleets or anything like that, that's 4 or 5 years of our lives that we put into our new baby. At $1 million or $2 million or maybe 2.7 million that are stroked a check for. And now, the best it's ever going to look is the day that I give it to you. So now it's up to me, and I feel up to fleet managers or even volunteer corporations, is that we got to start caring about that apparatus from the day you get it issued to you. So keeping it clean, understanding the rig, learn about your apparatus, regardless of your time in service. You made a very good point, is like a firefighter, 20-year-old Ricky had no idea what an amp draw report was. But that information's out there now. I mean, I would never have been able to find it 20, 25 years ago. I've never been able to find it. Now it's all available online. I can type in amp draw report now in Google, and boom, it'll give you a bunch of things. And that's just making your firefighters curious. I can distinctly remember telling my captain, I never want to drive a fire truck. I just ride in the bucket. And then I started driving fire trucks and found out how much I loved it. But once again, it's learning about the rig, taking care of the rig. There's so much more online now for firefighters to view, rather than trying to read, the 4-inch binder that came with the fire truck that covered every component. Now I can Google almost anything and it's got a video. And, thank goodness, people like yourselves and the OEMs understand the learning curve that we have today in the fire service, where, if it's not consumable in 2 to 3 minutes, nobody's going to sit there and watch a video for 15 to 20 minutes. It's just not going to happen. We've probably already gone too long on this podcast for somebody to pay attention. But, that's a good, we got to start learning to take care of these things. How do you take care of the pump? It's just not, making sure it goes in gear and then you rev it up and, the pressure governor makes some changes. What do we got to do to lube it? What do we got to do to make sure all the connections are right? And then it just expands when we get to an aerial ladder truck. I mean, I'm going to climb 100 feet up in the air into something, and I'm never going to look at how to take care of it. What I'm supposed to, how to learn how to inspect it. Going to those OEM classes are probably the doze fest that they are, by going to an OEM. But I mean, everything that they cover in an OEM training program is because a firefighter like myself did something stupid or didn't do something right or got hurt or injured and sued. So they had to put this in there. But now it's for us as the fire service to take it to that next level. And look, if we went and taught this class at FDIC, we're certainly not going to get a packed room. I mean, there's no humanly way that we're going to get that. But hey, if we get just enough people in there to, hey, this is how you do a pump check. This is how you do an aerial check. This is how you check to make sure your hydraulic tools are working. How do you check your lights? And you think lights is a goofy thing, but when bulbs, when the little LEDs start burning out, man, you got to start paying attention what's going on with those particular things, or what's going on with your scene light. Are they not as bright as they used to be? So I really put a lot of the onus on the day-to-day firefighter that's using the end product to care for the rig. I mean, we talked Eddie, like I said, we talked about Eddie Rice earlier. I mean, DC Fire Department, oh my God, the way they take care of their apparatus. I mean, they beat it up to death. But I meant the technicians that ride those rigs that are assigned as drivers, taking great care of it, great pride in the apparatus, great pride in the appearance, and then also behind the pump panel or behind the aerial, taking care of those things. They post pictures all the time of taking care of that. That's how we also extend the service of a piece of apparatus, is taking care of it from day one, and that comes through education. And I think a lot of us fail in fire departments by not teaching our firefighters how to take care of that rig, other than putting wax on it or aluminum polish. So
Great point.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a great point there, and it's almost to reiterate on our side. That's kind of why we started Recon, right? Was we saw that we had this huge need that wasn't being fulfilled on the brands that we represent, where we make claims like the product's durable, it's long lasting, and it is a quality product, but comes along with that is maintenance, understanding how it works, understanding how to clean it, understanding how to upkeep it, so you have that durable, long lasting product, and all from a educational approach. So Jason and I have spent the past almost 2 years now just developing over a library of 100 different videos on legacy product and current product and new products. So I think you're driving home a huge point that we are passionate about and believe too, that we got to find a way to get the message out. And for us, and like you mentioned, it's in the form of something consumable, whether it's a video or this podcast and whatnot. So I really think that's a great point there. But as we sort of shift the podcast now, talking about things that you can upfit and upgrade, have you had any involvement on upfitting a camera system or a video system to an existing rig? And if so, maybe some challenges and pros and cons to doing that.
Let's go with 20 and 30 and maybe even 40-year-old Ricky wanted to have nothing to do with a camera in a fire truck at all. Zero. In my own department, we had an incident where a firefighter fell out of the fire truck. Matt, we were at our OEM, our chosen OEM, me, the fire chief, the operations chief. We were all out there looking at a new rig for a final, and this accident happens. And I watched the group immediately want to blame the OEM. I mean, that was the first thing, we want to blame the OEM. The seatbelt got hung up on the door latch. The door latch is too close to the door. They accepted the rig. They signed the piece of paper when they got the rig, 2 or 3 years ago. But they were trying to blame the piece of apparatus or the OEM. I learned a long time ago, facts before acts. So let's get all the facts of how this happened. I'll get all the information. And this was one of the very first cameras that they put in the rig. So now we have a video of the firefighter falling out of the rig and the rig turning away. But the piece that helped out was the VDR data. So now in NFPA 1900, a VDR is not required. A sad state of affairs, and I was talking to Eddie Rice, and like, Eddie, you're on the 1900 committee. What's the deal? Well, it's a bulky system. People don't know how to use it. I mean, it is a lot of information. And, we were able to tell, not beating up the kid. I mean, never sat in the seat, never had a seatbelt on. Well, I mean, that's against policy of the department. You're supposed to be seated, have your seatbelt on. And, so when he flung his coat on, something got caught on the door latch, and then their inertia of making the turn, he falls out of the fire truck. The fire chief at that particular time, I give her a lot of credit. Here's money. I want every fire truck in the fleet with a camera system. So we're talking 300 and some odd plus cameras that we got to install. And once again, we have a lot of data. And now with AI stuff that's coming out with these cameras, that's even more data of what's happening with our accidents. I'm not responsible for discipline. I'm not responsible for, I just provide the information to them. But I would say that, we're in a pretty good percentage rate of where we're able to prove that we were not at fault or we were at fault. And it's just one of those things. And we've had some horrific accidents. I mean, we had a tractor trailer hit one of our ambulances, and only through the grace of God, these two guys didn't get hurt or anybody got hurt. But, now we're able to capture 3 angles of the accident from 3 different pieces of apparatus. So, now we're able to piece that all together for our after action report. But literally, as I responded to the scene, I had a driver that night, I had an aide with me that night, and I'm in the car already opening the camera program to download the cameras. So we had it when we got there, so we were able to show the trooper or the police officer. And I literally did that again last night, sitting on the scene, and the driver of the emergency vehicle and the driver of the civilian vehicle had a disagreement on it, and like, here it is, here's the accident, here's how it happened. So I can't say enough about it. I certainly think if I was still driving fire apparatus today, I'd still hate it and wouldn't want to have anything to do with them. But I think it's video doesn't lie. And that's the problem, is that video doesn't lie, and it gives us a good understanding of what's going on in the fire truck, and it gives us a good understanding of what's going on outside the fire truck. And hopefully we can use that information to make our fire service better and safer. But the biggest challenge is just the time that you got to take the rigs down. If you don't get them put in by the OEM manufacturer, is that, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I'm like, you put 300 cameras in, you just can't go, hey, mechanic guy, I need this done in 30 minutes. It's in Jiffy Lube. We got to find the grounds. We got to find, the emergency master switch. We got to get everything right. It's got to get calibrated. But these systems need to be in our fire apparatus today, 100%, especially with the accidents that we're having, the challenges that our firefighters are dealing with. I wouldn't want to drive today a piece of fire apparatus, just trying to get through traffic, distracted drivers, angry drivers, road rage drivers, traffic. The amount of traffic is just insane. And, I think this helps them when they have this challenge where they're not at fault. Would pose this question, just if you don't mind me asking.
Well, so we deal with some camera systems. We have some stuff out there, but one of the points that I've always made to people, I hear the driver that says, "Oh, I don't want it's going to be used against me." Listen, if you're doing things the right way, it's not going to be used against you. It's going to be used to exonerate you. And the one thing that I've found is if you're in the right and you have an accident, there are other people typically that have that on video. They don't want to share it with you when you're in the right. Now, if you did something wrong, man, it's all over the internet. Look what this guy did. So like having that to protect you. And if you're in the wrong, hey, you're in the wrong, but you're not questioning yourself. You know what you did at least, because it's there. Like you said, the video doesn't lie.
I mean, I'd be hypocritical. I am a hypocrite because I would never, I remember the driving experiences that I had, and it was only through, once again, the grace of God that I didn't hurt or injure someone. And, as I've gotten older and survived those times, now it's, look, you don't want to be going to a gas leak, second or third due, and get in an accident and damage the apparatus, damage a civilian, hurt or kill a civilian, and that is never going to go away from you ever. It's going to be with you your entire life. I mean, look, I mean, the Kansas City accident, it's in the news today, on the internet, from, a couple years ago. That is still going on. So that's never going to go away. So, you need a good driver and somebody that's responsible. I would say, when I began driving fire apparatus in Fairfax County, good company officers control young 20-year-old Ricky really, really well. So if you don't have a good company officer that can, reel that driver back in or teach them responsibility, then, if you're just going to have this kid just go off the rails every time, you're just asking for a disaster to happen. But that's all I just try to tell them is that, look, man, was it worth it? Going third due to a gas leak, getting in an accident, not coming to a complete stop at a red light. And I understand, I get it, young drivers, I understand, I know what it's like, but it's really not worth it to get in an accident or possibly hurt or kill somebody for a gas leak or a carbon monoxide alarm or food on the stove or something like that. So, having the camera in there, if that helps deter some of that, then I'm 100% for it. 100% for it.
Yeah, great points today, Ricky. And as we sort of finish up the show, we like to reemphasize a lot of the great points that you talked about. So maybe first thing, 3 key items that you would say get overlooked when it comes to apparatus maintenance.
Brake pads and brake wear. That is, I don't think, I would really like if the manufacturers of the brakes had a much clearer system or a visual for our firefighters so they could see it more easily. Or for goodness sake, how do we not have an indicator on a panel to tell us when the brakes are getting low? Yeah. So that is something that, you need to learn to do for apparatus maintenance. Attention to the cooling system. And, that's all those blue and black hoses on your fire truck that need to be checked to make sure they're not dry rotting, the clamps aren't biting into them, because that is probably one of our biggest out of service items. And I would say that's for anybody, regardless of jurisdiction, geographic area, or OEM, just the way how hot the motors are running now. And then understanding and maintaining your main function. And what I mean by that is that, do you understand your pump? Do you understand your aerial? Do you understand your hydraulic tool system, airbag system? And do you maintain it? And are you following the maintaining procedures through, the manual that was given to you, going online and finding out about it, watching any kind of video that you can find? So those are my 3 things that get overlooked, and mainly in fire apparatus stuff. So.
Yeah, and then finally, 3 key items that you would consider retrofitting on an older apparatus or upgrading.
Sure. If I can do it, motor. If I can do it, transmission. Make sure I'm looking at the main device, whether it be the aerial, the pump, the generator for the heavy duty rescue squad, the hydraulic tools. And then one of my major concerns is always going to be weight. So I think that is something that is very well, we weigh everything the day it comes in and then the day of the accident. Or if it comes in and we look at it and something doesn't look right. We just did Kent Land's rescue engine. I could talk about Kent Land because I'm a volunteer there. Is that, they have a rescue engine, and I helped design it. But, as it's gone from its lifespan, we've added so much equipment to it. Now it's sitting right to left or left to right. So now it's going back there, rebalancing the equipment by using scales. And then if we're going to retrofit the apparatus, is that what are we putting on there that's heavier? I mean, everybody, if we look at a HDR, we just did that ourselves. We did this ourselves. We retrofitted the hydraulic rescue tool system on one of our rescue squads, and we put battery powered and hydraulic. And look, Ricky is all about the hydraulic because it is much lighter than the battery ones. That is something you got to take into account when you're, retrofitting or upgrading apparatus. How much more weight that we're putting in that rig? How much heavier is the fan with a battery in it? How much heavier is this tool with a battery in it? How much heavier or how much lighter this stuff is? So always keeping a good weight there, and then obviously always making sure that we're checking the brake system, because that is our that's how we stop and don't get in accidents. So.
No, great points today, Ricky. And again, appreciate your time. Jason, I'll open it up to you for any final comments here as we sign off.
I think we've covered a lot. I can say that I'm an apparatus geek just like Ricky, so we could sit here and talk all day about this stuff. We'd love to have you on again in the future because there's a lot more we can talk about. We really appreciate your time today and hope the audience got a lot out of this because there's some great information in there.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation. Appreciate the reach out.
Yeah, no problem. So again, you listened to another episode of Rig Recon Live. If you haven't already, follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook. That's at Rig Recon. Catch up on all the latest podcasts. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, including you can watch it on YouTube. And then most importantly, like we emphasized today, a lot of educational resources on rigrecon.com when it comes to how-to videos, technical videos, repair videos, cleaning and maintenance, and so much more. So make sure you visit that website. But until then, expect the best.